Okay, so we're going to spend some time on this slide only. Um, so we're going to get to know Socioeconomic Mag a little bit, and we're going to do it on this handout. So we'll start with the first page, which says basically, what is Socioeconomic Mag? Has everybody got one of these? Almost. Okay. All right. Even the helpers can have one. We have enough. Nothing is too good for you all. I think, I don't know if Laís and Luis have them. Anyway, okay. So those of you who are familiar with Gender Mag, this will sound very familiar. Those of you who are not, welcome to the world of mags and inclusive design. So this is all about individual differences in the ways people use software, think about problems. And as was true with gender, it's also true by socioeconomic status. Ways people use software differ by their socioeconomic status. Um, and there's a lot of literature that shows this, and it's especially true in problem solving, such as working with visualizations, figuring out budgets, debugging, anything that's problem solving. However, many software features are inadvertently designed in a way that does not support people at one end of the socioeconomic spectrum or the other, and usually the end that is not getting thought about is the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum, and we want to be inclusive to everybody. It makes good sense, not only from a fairness perspective, but also when our students graduate, from a market share perspective. I mean, there's just no reason not to. So, okay, as was also true with Gender Mag, at the socioeconomic method's core are these facets that relate to the way people go about problem solving, especially with technology. And they're not the same facets, or most of them aren't, as the ones you're used to with Gender Mag, because these facets were specifically chosen from the literature because they tend to statistically cluster by socioeconomic status. So that's why these 6 and not all the bazillion other ones that also could have been included. All right, so the 6 facets are a user's access to reliable technology. That's the first bullet point here. And we're going to talk about all of these in more depth soon. Their communication, literacy, education, and culture. Now that is saying a lot, all in one sentence. Okay, trust me, that's just the way we had to do it. We'll get into it soon. Their attitudes toward technology risks. We've separated privacy and security out into a separate bullet that comes next. So the attitudes toward risk here are talking about risks not about privacy and security, risks to them just flat out wasting their time, risks, all kinds of risks, risks to not being able to complete because, you know, as soon as the bus goes another block, they're no longer going to have Wi-Fi access. I mean, any risk other than privacy and security. The reason we separated out privacy and security is because that's such a huge statistical differentiator by socioeconomic status. And so we did not want people to get so locked up on one kind of risk they forgot privacy and security, or vice versa. Another one is people's perception of control over their lives, and also attitudes toward authority figures. And this can greatly impact the way people are using technology. And finally, here's one you all will recognize, or at least you Gender Mag experienced people: technology self-efficacy. Just as there are gender differences in how confident somebody is with some particular type of technology, there are also statistical socioeconomic differences in someone's confidence with using a particular technology. So those are the big 6, like you had a big 5 with Gender Mag. And as we did with Gender Mag, we bring these facets to life with some personas. We have Dav, sometimes pronounced Dave. I don't really care how you pronounce it. And this is our representative picture of Dave or Dav. you can see that actually what picture we use is not particularly important. You can pick any picture you want, any age, any ethnicity, anything, okay? Because the important thing, just as was true with GenderMag, is the facets, not the picture, not the age, okay? Our highest socioeconomic status persona is Phi. Once again, any picture will do, any ethnicity, anything. And our middle socioeconomic status person is Ash. So there we have it. And pretty soon we're going to particularly get to know Dave, because Dave is our lowest socioeconomic status person, the person that most technology particularly seems to ignore. And so provides the strongest magnifying glass toward our ability to find SES inclusivity problems. We'll find them with any of the personas, and there'll be different problems, but we'll find most of them with Dave, because Dave's the one who most often gets overlooked. And the whole purpose, just as with GenderMag, is that software developers, this means the students that you all are about to graduate, they can use this method to make their software better. And by better, we mean better able to serve a wider swath of the population, which means market share to the employers, and it means social justice for their hearts and souls. So, and just as we did with GenderMag, what we would like is to work this into our students' day jobs so that it's just part of everything they do. Okay, it's just quality control, just like testing, just like debugging, and that they just do it from now on. That was page 1. Questions so far? Somebody asked me something hard. How do you know that such and such? Come on, I'm high socioeconomic and I'm not so-and-so. Ask me anything. Oh, yay. Okay, go on. So Lais asked a question. If we ask people to choose a persona that they identify with the most closely, do we think that students will be ashamed to choose Dave because that identifies them in public as feeling like they're low socioeconomic? It's a great question. And the question also can apply to Abby, Pat, and Tim, depending on how we present things with Abby, Pat, and Tim, because some people may believe that being an Abby is somehow shameful. And I have seen some faculty nuance it that way inadvertently. And when they do, they always say, well, in my class, all I ever get is Tim's. Well, surprise. That's how they presented it. But when people present the different personas kind of the way, for example, that Steve did, there was no implication at all of a more or a less about anything. Everybody was just different. And so what we haven't done in writing is ever said that Dave is low socioeconomic or that Phi is high socioeconomic. We never mention it in any of the personas. And you don't actually have to either. And so you can talk about these personas the same way you were able to talk about the GenderMag personas in terms of their facets. And these 6 facets are the big things, and there's nothing in there about socioeconomic status. So it is possible to screw up in exactly that way. Please don't. Yeah. Yes, Jillian.
There's a lot more room than just 3 people, because you're taking into account a lot of different attributes that are listed here in relation to technology. But then when you also include all of the different socioeconomic places you can be in the world, I feel like there's much more room to cover a much wider ground. So how do you like reduce it to just 3 people?
Aha. We got the persona explosion question. I love it. Okay, so we've been out there blundering around with SocioeconomicMag and SocioeconomicMag enough to where we've run into almost every possible question, although actually, I never got that one. So Lais gets a prize for the first time I've heard that question, although we didn't bring any prizes, but you can have an extra cookie, which I think everybody can because there are a lot of them. Anyway, so that's actually the beauty of the way the MAG, okay, so now the question I'm answering is Jillian's. The beauty of the way the MAG personas are set up. So let's consider a user, the first one on the bullet list, a user's access to reliable technology.
Please repeat Jillian's questions for the online crowd. Thank you.
Okay, it was the persona explosion question. So what Jillian asked was, how is it possible for three measly little personas to represent the huge variety of things that differ across so many different possible socioeconomic statuses? Okay, and she's nodding, so I captured it. Okay, now we get to the answer. And I'm going to draw on the whiteboard, but Rose knows what I'm drawing on the whiteboard because I've drawn it so many times. Rose, I'm drawing a spectrum that has to do with endpoints and the user's access to reliable technology facet. So you can just draw it too, maybe. But here I go. Okay. And so the idea behind the socioeconomic status method is that an interface, a technology, a pixels, instructions, anything needs to support both Dave and Fee simultaneously. So that doesn't mean simultaneously. So that doesn't mean, oh, there's a version for this person. Oh, there's a whole nother version for this person. It means it's got to work for both of them at once. And if it works for both of them at once, that means it works for anyone, anywhere in here also.
So would you say that that Dave captures the far extreme in one direction and B captures the farthest extreme in the opposite direction?
Almost. So what Alec asked is, do Dave and Fee capture opposite extremes? And it's kind of sort of on the extremes. These extremes are common extremes, so not rare, that actually happen to more low SES people than high. And these extremes likewise are common, not rare. There will be other things more extreme than these extremes that are rarer, but we don't capture them. Okay, so they're not extremely extreme. They're just, we call them endpoints. The endpoints, I guess, of the spectrum that we're capturing. So for example, the situation of no access to technology whatsoever, ever, we don't capture that. And maybe it's because we don't need to. If they have no access to any form of technology at all, ever, we probably don't have to design technology for that person. Anyway, so here's the key. This is why we don't need a persona for every possible endpoint, is because we treat these things as a spectrum, and the whole spectrum has to be supported at once by one product. Yes.
Technology, because like I personally at Keen, have lack of access to high performance computing, to quantum computing, to storage, like Google storage is very limited. So which exactly technology are we talking about? Do we go to up to that one level, or
whatever they need for the application that we're trying to evaluate right now? So if what we're trying to evaluate is an application that requires all of this superpowered storage, then yes, it has to include that. And if the app we're trying to evaluate is just, like the Canvas learning environment, then just whatever technology it takes to run that. Yeah, because remember, SocioeconomicMag, it's always specific to the thing you're trying to evaluate with it, just like GenderMag was. I answered your question okay, or are you still looking doubtful?
I think I'm good.
You're good. You're doubtful, but you're not going to take up any more airtime. Okay, well, don't worry, because all the students know this so well, they will answer all your questions. Yes, Mark?
So that range you draw, is that done for each of these 6 bullets, facets independently, is it all lumped together into one aggregate?
Yes.
So I can see these 6 things as.
There used to be an eraser somewhere. Huh. I hear your question, Mark. Mark wants to know whether these 6 values are connected to each other or independent of one another. And both. So, all right, so there are 6 of these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, 6. And all of them are independent. There will be some people in the world who circle, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all along there, but not very many. What's much more common is for people to circle this one and that one and this one and this one and this one and that one. So people tend to bounce around in here. But there are people all the way over here on every single one. And there are people all the way over here on every single one. And in fact, when we gather this kind of data for GenderMag, which has a similar thing, what we generally see is something that looks like this. So I've switched back to GenderMag for a moment. 5, Abby. 0, Tim. 0, Abby. 5, Tim. And what we generally see is for 2 of the genders, the one where the 2 that we get a lot of numbers on, we tend to see women sort of all over the map, every possible combination. And we tend to see men all over the map, every possible combination, but we see different statistical skews, with the men skewing over here toward the Tims and the women skewing over here toward the Abbies. So there are always a few that are pure Tims and always a few that are pure Abbies. But these statistical skews appear again and again and again and again and again. And we expect to see the same sort of thing by socioeconomic status. And so that's the other reason why this simultaneously is so important. It's because there aren't that many pure Daves in the world, and there aren't that many pure Fees in the world, but there are lots of people with one or another of these way over here facets, and there are people who move too, depending on the situation. Yeah.
So first time I heard about this, I think because of the word economic, that even though you don't say Dave is lowest and someone is highest, still, because of the word economic, I would not want to disclose my persona.
Okay, fair enough. And that's a very good comment. So some people, some faculty and some industrial people never boil down to personas at all, and that's fine. You can strictly work at the level of facets. So for example, in Steve's exercises, if he wanted to change them, instead of saying, who do you identify most with on this one, Abby, Tim, or Pat, he could say, which information processing style do you think, you used, just selected little bits, one, as you needed them, or, absorbing a whole lot at the beginning and then kind of going forth in a plan. And then, likewise, you can ask a different question about tinkering and that sort of thing. So either way can work. Yeah.
I don't know. So for example, if we explain this, would it be a good idea to say socioeconomic? Because maybe even though my economic level is low, I may be biased and say I'm high.
Right. Okay, another very good question. Dehan is asking whether we ought to just leave the word socioeconomic out of the whole conversation so that people don't make inferences about what might be embarrassing for them to say in public. And we've had similar questions in the past also about gender mag. Should we just leave gender out of the conversation? Both of those things are possible if you want to do that. If it helps your comfort level, that's fine. All of these are members of a family of methods called inclusive mag. And so if it's more comfortable for you, you can just use the family name when you're describing this. So all of these are members of the inclusive mag family. You can just say, you know, this is another variant of inclusive mag. And there's nothing wrong at all with that. Yeah.
We're at a perceived value. So in terms of like, there's apps like people have, I guess, like a net worth. You can actually calculate it's a number. But by definition, you know, most folks are in the quote middle class in terms of an absolute value. But in that middle class, some middle class folks, I know they feel like, and they are blessed and they feel rich. Other middle class people, they compare themselves, you know, comparisons to a Bill Gates, oh, I feel poor and various things. So that the perception of whether you feel rich or poor, which is related but separate than an absolute like a net worth kind of number.
Yeah.
Does that impact people's view on technology and different things based on, you know, an absolute economic? What do you mean by the word economic?
Yeah.
Is it related to an absolute number, or is it related to what you in your mind?
Yeah. It's
rightly or wrongly perceive yourself as?
Yeah, it's a great question. Mark wants to know whether the way we're referring to socioeconomics is actual on some, you know, absolute scale, according to net worth, or perceived, you know, identity, as per people's heads. And the answer is identity. So, for example, let's consider a specific person I know. She grew up, you know, working, you know, with her whole family, you know, scratching to make ends meet, and, you know, very low socioeconomic mag. And now, as an adult for decades, she's worked for high-tech companies and makes, you know, a lot of money, and is married to a man who also works for high-tech and also makes a lot of money. So they're very well off. And yet, they recently they applied for a car loan. I don't know why. They probably could have paid cash for the car, but maybe they thought it was economically, you know, more strategic to get out a loan. And for some reason, it got denied. And her immediate response was, yeah, sure. You know, these things, they never go through. And so she was operating under her socioeconomic identity, the things that formed the way, you know, she had learned to regard the world as a low socioeconomic person, and had nothing to do with her current net worth. On the other hand, her husband wasn't raised low socioeconomic, and he says, you know, what do you mean? You know, there's just something wrong. We'll look into it. So identity. And actually, while we're on the subject of that, with the help of people at Kean University, spearheaded by Pat, of course, we've been developing a survey that we can use to measure people's socioeconomic identity according to the way they feel, so that we can know, if we bring people into a lab, what socioeconomic identities they actually represent, so that we can do a good job of saying how our predictions are playing out with people across socioeconomic identities. Yeah.
So you've got on that scale there a low and a high.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at this list, and I don't think all these things can be measured as a low or a high. So for example, in number 2,
yeah,
communication, literacy, education, and culture. What does culture mean on a low or high scale?
Okay, good question, Mira. We are
also the control and attitude toward authority. Like what
yeah,
would that mean?
You're right. You're right. We need different labels for those two. And we're going to get into the facets real soon now. So let's see here. Let's move to page 2. This is a flow chart they all are looking at. This flow chart is pretty much the same deal for those of you who have used GenderMag in the past. So you're going to experience this in a minute. This is just your cheat sheet. So the way you actually use socioeconomic mag is you start by picking one of your personas. I pick Dave, yay, done. And then in whatever technology you're about to evaluate, a web page or, whatever, you pick a scenario or a use case that you want to evaluate. This example is for a sort of a Google map for inside a bookstore navigator, they call it. And the scenario is Dave wants to find science fiction books in that physical store using this map thing. All right, that's what we do for step 1. Then for step 2, we pick a sub goal for that scenario that we wish was in Dave's head. We don't know if it's in Dave's head, but we turn to the developers and say, okay, here's Dave. He wants to find science fiction books and he's in your store and he's looking at this screen. What do you wish was in his head? And developers say, what we wish he was thinking is, I'd like to see a bookstore map. And then as evaluators, we all get together and say, well, is that what's going to be in Dave's head? Yes, no, maybe, and why. You all are going to be doing this hands-on very shortly. Okay? And we write it all down. And that is the beginning of our inclusivity bug report. And then we push that sub-goal into Dave's head. Why? Because Dave is a fictional person. We can do anything we want. And we want to be able to move on with the evaluation. So even if Dave wouldn't have had that sub-goal, now he does. And we say, if Dave has that sub-goal in his head, what do we wish he would do with his fingers? And we turn to the developer, and the developer says, if Dave wants to see a bookstore map, we want Dave to push browse off. Okay? Seems lame, but that's what they were thinking. They were my students. They got better. Anyway, so then we say, is that what Dave's going to do with his fingers? Yes, no, maybe, and why? We turn to Dave's persona and study it and answer it from Dave's perspective, write it all down. Then we make him do it. And we see the resulting screen, which is just a mock-up in this little handout, and say, if Dave did that thing, will he feel like he's making progress toward his goal? Yes, no, maybe, and why? We write it down, complete the sequence until Dave gets to the end of the scenario. That's it, just like intermeg, only socioeconomic. The end.